Had a chance to eat something, which a couple of you are eating at the moment, which I guess is the events that I'm Geoff Mulgan from Nesta. I'm mainly here to do air traffic control. We're very glad to be hosting this event along with the Institute of Development Studies. And we'll try and cover a fair amount of ground, I hope reasonably quickly as you digest your lunch. I was going to say 2 minutes of intro before turning to the report's authors. I sort of first got involved in internet-y type things probably nearly 30 years ago, and I reckon throughout that period a whole series of claims have been made about digital dividends and reclaimed again and again. One set of claims about leapfrogging, about the potential to leapfrog infrastructures, to move entirely to, for example, mobile infrastructures without needing to go through the pains of cables and landlines. Claims about leapfrogging services, that you can create new kinds of money transfer or health if you don't have the powerful incumbents of the North. And claims about bypass, claims about digital helping to bypass intermediaries or local power structures, and of course claims about democratic bypassing despots. And then there's been a whole series of arguments again over now 3 decades at least about the internet as a commons, a different kind of commons to the crucial commons of perhaps 19th century or 20th century development in relation to health and education, which again should be able to accelerate development radically. And what's great about this report is it actually analyses in some ways the facts and shows how most of those claims don't really stand up to all that much scrutiny, how they contain elements of truth, but in many ways it's the respects in which those stories did not pan out as expected, which are as interesting as the ways in which they did. So we're going to hear now from 2 of the report's authors, and then we're going to have a series of comments. So I'm going to turn first of all to Deepak Mishra, and then Mulgan from the World Bank, who are the co-directors of the World Development Report. They'll share with us a lot of its contents, and then we've got 3 fantastic commentators, discussants, who will respond. Anne Gleamer from the World Wide Web Foundation, Nick Dyer, and we also have Ben Ramalian from IDS as well. So if I can turn to you, and hopefully the technology is all primed.
Thank you, Geoff. Recognizing the fact about the very generous and kind help that Nesta and IDS have given us in hosting this event. And also to mention that there are a couple of people in the audience, very familiar faces, including Richard Hicks, who is our advisory panel member, Tim Kelly, who is one of the chapter authors, and hopefully we'll get more time to interact during the Q&A session. This picture that you see on the screen captures the very essence of the 2016 World Development Report, how rapidly digital revolution has spread around the world and to what extent people will go to be a part of it. This photo, taken on the coast of the Horn of Africa, shows migrants from Somalia crowding the light source of Djibouti. We call it the modern day migration, which is the universal desire for connection, which is a strong resonance to what's happening in Europe in the last couple of months. If you're curious as to why these folks are holding their cell phone into the air, you'll have to read the full WDR, or at least pay attention to the rest of our presentation. Mobile phones have spread more rapidly than any technology before. Even among the poor, nearly 7 out of 10 people now have a mobile phone. Nearly 3.2 billion people, or 40% of the world population, are now online. We are used to seeing the world from its physical asset point of view, from land. But if you look at the world from its digital asset, people with smartphones and connection to the internet, the world looks a very different place. And we suddenly love our cell phone and the internet, and because of this particular picture, a typical day in the life of the internet involves billions of emails, video and searches. Behind these massive numbers lies staggering amount of data and information flows crossing borders seamlessly and costlessly. The digital revolution has brought many immediate private benefits: easier communication, wide range of information, considerable saving in time, and new forms of leisure. But what about broader development gains? Faster growth, more jobs, better services, which are collectively referred to as digital dividends in the report, similar to the concept of peace dividends and demographic dividends. The report analyzes the impact from the perspective of three agents: business, people, and government. And the color coding that you see on the screen is maintained throughout the report. So every time you see anything on services or government, it's aqua green, and so forth. The report mentions many technologies, from feature phones to smartphones, from computers to clouds, from sensors to satellites. But this report is not about technologies. It's about their impact on development. And to get a sense of that, I'll tell you three stories and introduce you to three people who we met and discussed while preparing this report. One of them is Hong Wei Meng. Meng owns a ranch in Shandong province in China. Meng trades on live animals on Alibaba's online trading platform. And he earns an annual revenue of $50,000, a hefty increase from the $200 disability benefit he used to get before. Meng proudly says, "I'm not a disabled man, I'm an online businessman." Alibaba has 8 million online entrepreneurs, of whom nearly 2/3 are small and medium entrepreneurs like Meng. 1/3 are women, and 1% are persons with disabilities. This would not have been possible without the internet. A few years ago, a satellite passed over East Africa, taking pictures of many villages, including Kendu Bay, a village near Lake Victoria. The satellite data were interpreted by freelancers working for a company called Mechanical Turk. They spotted the roof's luminosity, which is an indicator of poverty in Kenya. After verifying the information from the satellite data with the ground reality, workers from a Silicon Valley charity gave directly sent $1,000 unconditional cash transfers through mobile money, or M-Pesa, to several beneficiaries. One of the beneficiaries was Siprosa Kapoor, a widow with 8 children. The previous industrial revolutions had bypassed people like her, born into poverty in a remote village in a poor country. She doesn't have paved roads to her village. She doesn't have drinking water and electricity, but she is now part of the digital revolution, and this could not have been possible without digital technologies. The children on the picture were once the victims of human trafficking, condemned to a life of destitution. Like these children, nearly 1 billion Indians have been issued digital identification. This is making it possible for the government to provide vital services to poor and disadvantaged groups. Countries from Nigeria to Pakistan and Estonia to Singapore are other examples of successful use of digital ID to improve services delivery and to reduce fiscal waste. And this couldn't have been possible without the internet. So behind these very compelling stories lies some very fascinating economics. The WDR builds on the economic literature to propose a simple framework for understanding how the internet provides development or promotes development. And it happens in 3 ways. It expands the information base, it lowers the information cost, and it creates information good. By expanding the information base, we are creating new markets for business, workers, and government, thereby promoting inclusion. By lowering the information and coordination costs through automation, technology can make businesses, people, and government more productive. This is boosting efficiency. And finally, by creating information goods, when the product and process all become digital, and the marginal cost falls to essentially to zero, technology generates economies of scale, which spawn new business models like platform economy and promotes innovation. The report applies this framework in the first 3 chapters on growth, jobs, and service delivery to show the examples of benefits to business, people, and government. But everything I've said so far is what you'd find in a typical ICT report. Having established the benefit of digital technology, many have argued that it is only a matter of time before this benefit reaches everyone and to everywhere. but one wished the story was that simple. Digital technology has become universal in many high and middle-income countries, but the broader benefits still remain elusive. So let's talk of three such examples. The first picture shows that the growth of labor productivity has been slowing down for the last 25 years. The middle classes in many advanced economies have seen income stagnate over a very long period, and the inverted U-shaped graph on the middle shows that's where the middle class in the advanced economies reside, and that's been very small and stagnant. And many governance indicators, like the share of elections which are free and fair, seems to be actually deteriorating again over the last 30 years. So clearly there is something that's not right in terms of the broader pictures of this versus what I just gave you, those three anecdotal stories. The report does not argue that these trends are all because of digital technology, but wonders why they're happening in spite of them. In other words, why have digital technology been spreading rapidly, but dividends have lagged behind? And there are two broad reasons. The first is the easy one and more obvious one, that despite rapid technological progress, many parts of the world still have a persistent digital divide. So if 7.4 billion people in the world, out of which 6 billion don't have broadband, 4 billion don't have access to internet, 2 billion don't own a mobile phone, and 0.4 billion people still live outside any digital signal. But more importantly, within each country, there's a significant digital access gap across gender, income, age, and geography. So there is a large unfinished agenda to make the internet access universal and affordable. But even if we solve the access problem, technology is not neutral in its impact. Among those who have access, the benefits tend to flow disproportionately to the better off, more educated, and better connected, which is pretty obvious for anyone who understands the first economics, basic principle of economics. So in more practical terms, or more technical terms, digital technology are usually productivity bias, skills bias, and voice bias, as shown in this picture. So more productive firms use more technology, more skilled workers use more technology, and more connected people or more honest and accountable governments seems to be more enthusiastic user of technology. So clearly the two moves together, the x-axis which is more the structural variables and the y-axis which is the technology. So what the report argues is that there are factors beyond technology that shape their development impact. We call them the analog complements to digital development. And in absence of those complements, the benefits will often fall short, and this picture shows how. So if you have connectivity plus complement, you get these three wonderful things about innovation, efficiency, and inclusion. But in the absence of complements, what you end up with, more likely to end up with, more concentrated markets, more inequality in the society, and more state control and more state inclusion. So what are these complements and what to do about them? I invite Uwe to finish the presentation.
There are about 4 seats at the front here if anyone would like to come forward. 1 or 2.
Thanks very much. So we have this little routine where Deepak gets to talk about all the great things that the internet is doing, and then I have to come and talk about all the downsides and risks and so on. So let me give you a little bit of an overview of that. So let's begin with the impact on business. So the ICT sector itself is an important part of the economy, but it's actually relatively small. It's maybe 5% of GDP and 1 or 2% of the labor force. So most of the growth in output and jobs will have to come from firms in other sectors that use ICT. But this is not happening everywhere, and certainly it's not happening at the speed that we had expected. And in the report, we identify 3 concerns that are summarized in this very simple graph. So on the left, the adoption of digital technologies by non-ICT businesses has been quite slow in developing countries. One reason is often a lack of competitive pressure in a business environment that protects already dominant firms and vested interests. In the center, where online and offline businesses compete, there's uncertainty about how to regulate internet-based companies. Is Uber a taxi company or a software firm? That's a question that policymakers everywhere are grappling with, increasingly also in developing countries. And on the right, the economics of the internet favor natural monopolies, and we see the emergence of dominant firms in many parts of the digital economy. So far, this has generally been good for consumers, but economic history has taught us that firms are sooner or later tempted to exploit such a dominant position. And I think in Europe, a lot of the talk is about the right side of this graph, about the digital monopolies and the regulatory uncertainty. But what we find in the report really is that the biggest story in developing countries may well be in the analog economy, where we just don't see fast enough internet adoption among firms that's really holding up productivity gains, and we think that has a lot to do with the business climate and so on. So in summary, without good regulations, especially competition policies, that ensure a level playing field for firms to connect and compete, we may see much less innovation than expected. And we may instead end up with greater concentration in monopolies and with a divergence between firms and economies that are slow to adopt the internet and those that have quickly come to dominate their markets. The second risk relates to labor markets. The internet complements skills and allows workers to be more productive and to find more rewarding opportunities as well as higher wages. But it's also changing labor markets. New forms of work tend to be more informal, and automation is destroying some jobs, and increasingly that is also happening in white-collar, middle-class occupations. Where these changes are good for overall productivity in the economy, they can be deeply disruptive to individuals. And one of the results is an increasing polarization of labor markets, which we already see and is widely discussed in developed countries, but as we see in the report, in the analysis of the report, we also now see in the developing world. So in most of the countries in this figure, the share of middle-skilled, middle-paying occupations is falling, while the share of low-paying jobs is rising. And this is, of course, not all due to the internet. Urbanization, globalization, and so on also play a role, but digital technologies are an important driver of these trends. So as a result, the biggest risk from digital technologies may not be massive unemployment, but widening income inequality. And the most important public policy response is to help everyone to gain the skills that technology complements and not those that technology replaces. Finally, there have been a large number of e-government initiatives. These initiatives have given us easier access to information and more efficient government procedures. And we use the example of Estonia a lot, which in Europe is probably leading in this area in the application of technology in government. But an extensive review of the evidence shows that in many other countries, these investments often fail to address the two most difficult challenges to improve service delivery. One is the accountability relationship between service providers, policymakers, and citizens. And some of you may remember there was a very influential WDR in 2004 just on this one topic. And the second is the ability of citizens to participate in and influence public debates, the so-called collective action problem. The evidence compiled in the report suggests that initiatives that leverage technology to improve service delivery often fail when policymakers and service providers are not accountable and therefore lack a strong incentive to improve services. So in the report, we compile a lot of available data to measure where countries stand with respect to digital technology endowments and with respect to complements. So in this chart, we use a very simple, broad summary measure of the quality of regulations, skills, and institutions. Both rise with income, but there's considerable variation across countries. This data set provides a simple diagnostic tool to prioritize policies for countries at different stages of digital development. And we use this typology in the final 3 chapters of the report, which are all about policies, what to do where and when. They discuss implications for the ICT sector itself, policies to strengthen the analog complements that were identified in the first 3 chapters, and issues that cross borders and require global cooperation. So first, ICT policies that ensure that everyone will get affordable internet access. That gets us back to the cover photo that Deepak mentioned in the beginning, that people holding up mobile phones are migrants in Djibouti who strain to catch a signal from neighboring Somalia. Now, Djibouti is one of the few countries, the last few countries that still have a telecom monopoly, while Somalia, which is a much poorer and fragile economy, has a vibrant telecom sector with lots of competing providers. So in terms of supply-side policies, we actually have a pretty good idea of what is required. Strong competition policies in the telecom sector, public-private partnerships, and effective telecom and internet market regulation. The private sector will make most of the ICT infrastructure investments. The report argues that public support would sometimes be justified by the strong social benefits from internet access for all. The challenge is much harder when it comes to the demand side, or we call them second-generation policies. There are difficult questions about internet filtering and censorship, and how to ensure a level of personal privacy and cybersecurity that makes people feel safe when using the internet. And even the most advanced digital economies still struggle with these issues, as the discussions in many EU countries, for instance, show, and also in the United States. Second, there are many practical steps that countries can take to strengthen the analog complements, how to adapt regulations, skills, and institutions to the digital age at different levels of digital development. So in what we call emerging countries, internet use is still low, and the priority is to build the foundations, mostly by making adoption much easier. For transitioning countries, it is to ensure that everyone is able to take advantage of the opportunities that digital technologies offer. And in transforming countries where internet use is already very high, it is to address the wicked problems that the internet itself creates, such as complex competition or antitrust issues, or deepening the government's digital engagement with its citizens. The discussion in this chapter also highlights the many ways in which digital technologies in turn can actually help strengthen these analog complements, for example through well-designed online education or the final policy chapter deals with global issues, how to govern the global internet and how to remove barriers to the global digital market. One important aspect is how institutions such as the World Bank or DFID or other development partners can better leverage these technologies in their own work. So if the internet disrupts everything, should it not also disrupt the business of development? We hope that the report will contribute to a vibrant debate about this topic with our development partners. So in conclusion, the main message of the WBR is that digital development strategies need to be much broader than just ICT strategies. Connectivity for all remains a hugely important goal and a tremendous challenge, but countries need to do much more. So consider again the compelling examples that Deepak started out with. M-Pesa was able to roll out mobile money because of the rapid spread of cell phones in Kenya, but also because regulators allowed it to compete directly with banks. Alibaba's success builds on fast rising internet coverage in the country, but it is equally due to the many skilled entrepreneurs that are supported by a supportive business environment, including very good logistics. And India's Aadhaar digital ID system relies on large databases and fast communication, but it cannot be an effective tool for service delivery to poor and disadvantaged populations without accountable policymakers and service providers at all levels of government. What the WBR 2016 proposes is that when these complements to digital investments are absent, the development impact of new technology will often be disappointing. But when countries build strong analog foundations, they will harvest ample digital dividends. Faster growth, more jobs, and better services. Thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to your comments and the discussion.
Well, thanks very much, Mulgan and Deepak. We will now move on to some comments. I think in the later discussion, we're keen to dive a bit more into country differences, which places you admire for getting the right regulatory framework, skills, approaches, and so on. And not just Estonia. And I'm sure you've got a lot to say, particularly about the last two sections of Mulgan's comments. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Anne Dunn. I'm the CEO of the World Wide Web Foundation, which was established by the inventor of the web, Sir Tim Berners-Lee, to further his vision of the open web as a basic right and a public good. I have actually worked in development for a very long time. I used to work for ActionAid for many, many years and worked a lot with colleagues at IBS. And if you had told me 10 years ago that I would be listening to two economists from the World Bank passionately espouse the need for more regulation, I would have and equally, and you told me that I would end up working on technology, I would have laughed as well. So things change. The world is changing fast. More and better regulation. So, no, seriously, one of the things that I really liked about the World Development Report is that it dispels a lot of myths, as Geoff was saying, that the internet is naturally some kind of fountain of innovation and consumer benefit. It can be, it can be, and with the growth of the web, we have seen in Europe and North America in particular an unprecedented period of innovation. But as the report points out, in order to enable that, we do need effective and transparent regulation. We need wise policies, and we need smart government investment, whether that's public-private investment or good old-fashioned government investment. It was great to read in the report the analysis of the trend towards market concentration, which is a big worry. There is a natural tendency, as we heard from Deepak, towards oligopolies or monopolies that eventually will dampen competition and innovation and take away the consumer benefit that many people have realized through the internet. Commercial bias in the management of internet traffic, so that the loss of net neutrality can exacerbate that tendency further, and that's a big worry. Our web index research showed that 75% of the countries that we studied, we looked at 86 countries around the world, 3/4 of them lacked any kind of effective regulation of net neutrality, or the principle that you don't discriminate between different types of internet traffic depending on how profitable they are for the carrier. Restricted intellectual property rights, including digital copyright, has been a growing issue in trade agreements around the world. Tax avoidance is particularly hard to tackle in the digital economy. And more indirectly, when governments colonize the internet as a tool for political control and surveillance, the resulting concentration of state power, of political power, can magnify concentration of economic power, as we're arguably seeing in Russia, for example. So I thought that was a really, really important contribution of the WDR, very high quality analysis around some of those issues too. Another thing that I really liked is that the WDR confronts the reality and the extent of digital inequality head on. But it also sends a very clear message that we must do something about it fast. The internet is no magical solution to poverty or to the structural challenges of development. And in fact, as we've heard already this morning, it magnifies existing inequalities in many ways. But if we don't act now, and this is something that we believe very passionately at the Web Foundation, poor countries and poor people will be much worse off in 5 years, in 10 years. So we need to act. What do we need to do? Absolutely yes to the analog foundations of the digital revolution. Education, winning that race between technology and education is going to be critical in the next decade, and developing countries need a lot of resources. They're going to need a lot of financial and human resources in order to be able to catch up in that race. Women's rights is critical, and the bedrock of political and civil liberties and government accountability, which is increasingly under attack in many countries, both offline as well as online. That will also be critical analog foundation for countries to benefit from the digital revolution. But at the same time, we need to move faster to establish digital foundations for the analog world, because increasingly those who are excluded online will also be marginalized offline. So digital skills need to become a fundamental part of the right to education. When we talk about the right to education from now on, we can't just be talking about reading, writing, and arithmetic. We must be talking about digital skills. Free and open access to information online, including to government data, has got to be a foundation when we talk about the right to information. So when we talk about right to information, let's talk about proactive disclosure of government data online. Women's ability and capacity to exploit the internet safely, but also creatively, has to be seen as one of the foundations for gender equality. Our women's rights online research in 10 developing countries show that women right now, women in poor urban areas, are 50% less likely to be online and 30 to 50% less likely to be using the internet and social media for economic advancement and civic participation than men, even when controlling for education and household wealth. And our web index research showed that, again, around 3/4 of countries are just not doing enough to stop online violence and abuse against women. 60% of them don't even have any kind of concrete target for gender equity as part of their national ICT plan or strategy. Not even a target, let alone a budget or a set of programs. We have to ensure a level online playing field for companies, big and small, as a fundamental foundation for economic development. Net neutrality, I've already mentioned, balanced digital intellectual property rights, the need for strong and capable and fair regulation to address market concentration in the tech sector, fair taxation of online service providers and telcos. It's not just Her Majesty's government here in the UK that has difficulty taxing online service providers effectively. It's an even bigger issue for developing countries. And those difficulties, if not tackled in turn, will deprive them of tax revenues that they need to be able to invest in infrastructure, universal access, and digital skills. All of these things require universal access to the internet, not just to Facebook, as a foundational public service. All of the internet for all of the people, all of the time, as my colleague Nesta says. And affordability is key to that. Our forthcoming affordability report shows that in all but one of the 14 least developed countries that we looked at, a monthly allocation of just 500 megabytes of mobile data is unaffordable to between 80 and 100% of the population. 80 to 100% of the population cannot afford at the benchmark affordability set by the UN. Government capacity to advance affordability through competitive, flexible, and efficient policies in areas like infrastructure sharing, spectrum, well-designed infrastructure investments. This needs donor support. It needs private sector support. Very few of the developing countries in our affordability report are scoring more than the equivalent of a C or a C plus on the policy drivers for affordability. Excess import taxes, patents, and royalties on devices are another big affordability problem. There's been a lot of hype about the spread of the cheap smartphone. Did you know that about half of the cost of the smartphone in your pocket is patents and royalties? Half. So that's another issue that urgently needs to be dealt with. But at the same time, we're going to need much bigger public access schemes. We're going to need free municipal Wi-Fi, we're going to need public access in schools and libraries and community centers, and that's going to have to be subsidized through taxes by the government for those who at any price still will not be able to afford full access to the internet. Maybe even something like a free basic data allocation. In many countries we have a free basic quota of water or electricity. Why not a free basic quota of data? So I want to close by suggesting three things that the World Bank in particular, having taken a leadership role with this great report, can do to help operationalize it. First of all, the bank needs to help to galvanize an unprecedented effort to connect everybody and spread digital capabilities across developing countries. Our 2015 Web Index shows that low-income countries managed to raise internet connection rates only by 2 percentage points between 2011 and 2013. So it was at 7%, they only got it up to around 9%. That growth is really slowing. Lack of progress on affordability is a big reason. There are other reasons as well. But on these trends, it's going to take 30 years to achieve the target that the UN just set to connect everybody by 2020. So we have 5 years to get there. If we allow current trends to crawl along at their current pace, it will take 30 years to connect 80% of the people in all these developed countries. So the World Bank really needs to galvanize and mobilize donors and companies and governments to commit more resources and commit them to the nuts and bolts that we've been hearing about this morning, not just to hackathons, not just to innovation challenges. We need serious, sustained investments in these digital and analog foundations. Secondly, the World Bank needs to evaluate the potential impact of ICT projects and programs on human rights, including free speech and privacy, and the rights of women, before committing to financing, as well as throughout project life cycles. This is a basic and it should be non-negotiable. In fact, the telecoms industry dialogue, the telecom operators themselves have made that request. And finally, The Open Data Charter provides a set of 6 principles that the World Bank can commit to, both in its own development projects, but I think we would like to see the bank requesting recipient governments, partner governments, to open up government data relating to any projects and programs that the bank itself is financing. That would make a huge difference. The Alliance for Affordable Internet is an effort led by the Web Foundation to transform policy and regulation in ways that would rapidly accelerate progress towards connecting everyone in the developing world. And many donors have already become part of it. We're in discussions with the UK government about renewing their commitment and leadership in the Alliance. We hope that the World Bank will also join in, and that together we can achieve the big changes needed in order to make sure that developing countries do benefit from digital revolution in ways that will help to tackle inequality and poverty both online and offline. Thanks.
We're going to give you a chance later to respond on the World Bank proposals. I hope you might also say something about tax, which I have mentioned a few times, and the extent to which actually digital technology can in some ways make tax much easier, but in other ways much harder. There are 2 or 3 seats still unoccupied of people standing at the back. We'd like to try and take them there, and there. But let's now hear from Ben Ramalingam, if that's okay.
Thank you, everyone. And I just want to say thank you to the authors for such a terrific report. It's clearly a landmark report, and not just in international development. I think it gives us one of the most detailed and comprehensive analyses of the contribution of digital technologies to economics as a whole that we've had anywhere. And I think it does so in a way that's really accessible, not just to digital wants, but to people outside of that sphere. And I think that is unfortunately all too rare. And I think the third thing that's really important is that this is a report about development in the universal sense. It's about processes of social, economic, political transformations in developed and developing countries alike. And so I know there are many people here in the audience who are from the development sector, but also a number of you here from the UK public sector. And I think this report has relevance for you as well. So from the wealth of this report, I want to pick out 3 things that have real implications for how we do development policy and practice in low, middle, and high-income countries alike. And I think the first one of these messages is really about the institutional context. And what it spells out very clearly is that institutional context really matters most for digital success. In fact, Stian Westlake made this point more generally recently in a blog piece and a speech. And he referred to the often mentioned yew bows that were used by English archers and Welsh archers in 14th century battles against the French. And although people talk about the bow as being the reason why there were successes, Stian very elegantly shows that actually there were the institutions around the bow, the things that enabled archers to be trained, to be usefully deployed in peacetime, that enabled them to test things together, that really enabled the military success. And there are similar arguments around the Industrial Revolution. These are quite well rehearsed. There were steam-powered technologies together with the business and financing models that allowed entrepreneurs to recoup the benefits of those inventions. And a very topical example from the work of the Institute of Development Studies, we've just finished off a review of mobile technologies and how they're used to track disease outbreaks. And our overarching finding was that you cannot exploit real-time technologies and real-time data unless you have real-time institutions. And this is where national global health still really struggles. So I think the clear and unambiguous message about how society can best exploit digital technologies is really important because it's so often missing from digital government, from digital business, from digital development. And as we're all very well aware, these areas can seem overtly technologically utopian, carried away that because we have apps, we can solve the problems of poverty, we can address conflict, we can build resilience, we can trigger growth. I think what the WDR does is it very firmly puts these arguments in their place, and I think we have to be thankful for this. But I think we need to use this as a precedent to ask much more searching questions about digital developments wherever they may take place. And we also need to make sure that these institutional considerations are much more at the forefront when we're designing, planning, and implementing digital initiatives. I think the second thing that stands out for me is the very clear articulation of the things that we need to invest in if we want to recoup and distribute the benefits of digital development, growth, jobs, services. And these are the analog complements, the regulations, the skills, the institutions. And as Yuri and Deepak showed, a lack of these explains why the benefits are so unevenly distributed. And while it is really useful to have these spelled out explicitly, and again it gives us additional ammunition, I did also wonder if we needed to pay equal attention to social complements, behaviours, norms, culture, actually the things that were spelled out so well in the previous WDR on mind, society and culture. So if you think about the success of M-Pesa as one example that you quoted, everyone talks about regulation, everyone talks about the fantastic job Safaricom did in marketing and developing the technology, but actually it was the grounding in social networks and cross-community trust and in social norms that were in play in Kenya that enabled that tool to become so quickly spread. So I think that there's a role here to think about the social science beyond economics, and some of the work of the behavioural insights team here at Nesta, others around the world that are working on these issues might help give us some insight into the social and behavioural analogue complements. And third point of reflection, I guess really building on Anne's points here really, the Sustainable Development Goal, the idea that there's a universal target for affordable internet access, as well as a number of other areas in the SDGs, such as universal health, which would require better digital coverage. It's fantastic to hear the strength of the endorsement of the WDR as a means of addressing this digital divide. And I think the report also gives us a very clear enumeration of the size of the problem. There are 4 billion digital have-nots, 60% of the world population that cannot participate in the digital revolution in any meaningful way. 2 billion people who have no access to mobile phone, 500 million who live outside of the realms of any mobile signal. This is the phenomenon that some have whimsically referred to not as the internet, but as the internot. And so, in meeting this goal and overcoming and breaking down the internot, I wondered, is it really just a matter of technology and investment? Or is there a deeper issue about the kinds of impacts technologies can have? The research we just published at IDS on open data and governance synthesises a lot of the empirical evidence on the extent to which ICTs, digital technologies, can actually enable change. And what we found was that actually they very seldom influence the willingness of policymakers to respond to issues of inclusion, exclusion, vulnerability. Generally, where ICTs have a contribution is where policymakers and leaders and managers have already committed to learning, they've already committed to the feedback process, and ICTs are used to bolster that capacity, i.e. technology works when there is already an open door. But when that door is closed or locked, it's very hard for technology to make a contribution. So the question that I think should remain hanging over us, and Anna expressed it as well, how do we ensure digital development addresses the concerns of the poor, the marginalised, the disempowered? The digitally 4 billion digital have-nots suffer from all kinds of other exclusions, which aren't just digital. Their gender, their age, their class, their ethnicity. So in pushing for the goal, we need to think about digital access and reach. But we also need to think that Google balloons, Facebook drones, and SpaceX satellites may not be enough. We need to pay careful consideration to the issues of elite capture. We need to push on issues of politics and power. And I think it's really important to think about expanding digital access, but I think to reach this goal, we need to think much more about digital empowerment and what that looks like.
Great, thanks very much, Frank. Okay, well, our last speaker is Nick Dyer, who is Director General of Policy and Global Programs at DFID. Say a little bit about what this might mean for DFID, and I think the UK government's about to next week publish its digital strategy.
Great, thanks very much, and thanks for the report. And the great thing about coming third is that a lot of what you said. So actually, I'm going to offer you 3 things I think need to happen to disrupt the development business. And actually, quite like your ideas about how to develop the business, because I suspect it needs to be. But I just actually want to start with the report. And I've been in development a long time, and I've been a keen observer, consumer, actually a funder of World Development Reports. And there are, in my experience, two types of development reports that we see. And the thing you want to do when you get a new development report is to decide which one it is going to be. So you have one development report which is like a Catherine wheel. It fizzes, it's noisy, and then just pieces out and dies. And actually, there's quite a lot of them. And then you have the Mulgan reports, which are a bit more like flowers. So you plant them, they grow, they pollinate, and they make a difference. And there are some absolute transformational development reports out there. You can count them on one hand, actually. I'm just being honest. But I think this could be one of them. And I think it could be one of them because you've landed on an issue that most of us think intuitively is important. You've built a compelling case for it. You've been honest in terms of what can be the opportunity, but also what are the risks. And you've offered some tools that people can use. So, well done. I think it's a good report. And you only have to spend a little bit of time in sub-Saharan Africa to realise why intuitively this is so right. So if you go to the Innovation Hub in Nairobi, you can just see the ideas and the energy that's coming out of that. You only have to go to northern Kenya to see people using solar panels. We've got many using mobile technologies and data to ensure that you don't get stockouts in trucks. So these are really important opportunities. Most about this report actually is the annual conference. Of getting actual risk price risk development. It isn't, but so I'm going to be really quick here, and I'm going to ask the question: do we need to disrupt the development business? 10 years ago, Deepak did a ICT department that basically was trying to lay really give a really compelling case about how digital do ideas. We're doing 169 projects around the world that are using mobile technology to deliver services. We have an aspiration to be the best development agency in the world, or the most digitally enabled development agency in the world. We want services, we want to use digital to make services to ensure that development impact is bigger, it's faster, and it's more cost effective. We think technology can do that. We've got great stories in terms of how we are being open ourselves. All our projects, all our payments are online. If you want to know what Deepak is doing, it's there. We are promoting the Open Government Partnership in terms of making data available. We are investing in skills, we're doing business innovation. So in terms of all the analogs, we're there. But I think we've got a problem. I think the industry has a problem in terms of how do we actually unlock this disruption and the investments in digital. And I think there's three problems that we need to address. So, and actually welcome the World Bank's views about whether you share these problems. So I think there are three problems, and mention two of them. So the first is ensuring that the world is connected and that we are unlocking the opportunities for everybody to take advantage of not only digital technology but the internet. It is striking that we have, I don't know what the precise proportions are, but you've got, for the sake of argument, in sub-Saharan Africa, 20% of people who do have access to the internet use it, 60% who are covered but don't use it, and 20% who don't even have coverage. So how do you invest in the supply and demand sides to unlock that 60%, that 20%? And as Anne knows, as Deepak knows, UK government started to think this through in terms of what the interventions might be. So we've got to make sure that the platforms are there. The second thing that we really struggle with, and we struggle with in DFID, is the fact that we don't have the evidence. And we don't have enough examples of why things are working, but also about the spectacular failures. And there are some spectacular failures out there that we need to recognise, we need to learn from, We are trying to, within DFID, create a digital grid where we're putting together all our projects and programs to make them easily accessible and available across the organisation. But we want to take that out across the whole of the community so that we have a shared resource everything. 169 projects sounds a lot, but it's not when you consider that we've got 1,600. So actually, we're only tinkering with the margins of what we can do with digital. And I think this comes back to my biggest problem, actually, and I think it's the biggest problem we've got as an industry, and that is about our capability. And that is about our capacity and the skills that we have in the organisations that we're working to understand, to know how to reimagine services, to have the skills to be able to understand what technologies are out there. To some extent, we need plumbers, people who can do the work, and most of all, we need the architects who can stand back and think about what is actually needed and what's required. There aren't enough architects and plumbers in play on the digital side. And if you look across the launch of the digital strategy for government that's coming out shortly, and I was in, and I don't know if any of my digital colleagues were stuck in the room, but I was in a meeting, I was in a meeting across government on the digital strategy, and one of the collective challenges we're all scheming.
Things at the same time. The infrastructure issues probably have much more in common in some ways with water infrastructure or transport. They are about long-term investments, they are about still things in physical places, etc. And rather different in nature from the sort of service redesign issues, which require quite different capabilities and mindsets and forms of capital, which are in turn quite different from many of the open data, democracy, accountability issues. So it's becoming, I think, as digital becomes infused in almost everything that an economy or a society does, it becomes harder and harder to really almost have the kind of conversation we're about to have. And the one other point about evidence, which Nick mentioned, we've done a lot of work here on things like evidence around digital technology and education. There have been lots of examples of well-intentioned but almost entirely ineffective projects linking digital technology to education development. In a way that's shared, say, with the developed world, but it'd be interesting to hear thoughts about how the evidence sort of thresholds could be just made a bit more intelligent, because so much money is wasted. Who would like to indicate a desire to comment, question, harmony, disagree, challenge, etc.? And we'll take a few in one go, starting, maybe we start there at the back, and then you. Use only males indicating a desire to speak at the moment. Good, yeah.
Hi, it's Sebastian Monk from Deepak. I noticed, I really enjoyed the report, and I noticed in one of your 4 digital enablers was the data revolution. But we haven't really heard much around data in what we've been talking about today, and I just wondered if you could say a little bit more about the importance of data, because I think it has many of the same elements that we talked about. So, for example, we talk about regulation, we talk about skills, we talk about institutions. Those are all important for data as well. So, for example, with the monopolies, you can get companies capturing a data monopoly. You can have a lack of skills around people who understand the accuracy of data, provenance of data, just how to use it properly. And you also have a lack of institutions. And obviously there's been movement on this, a lot of movement over the past few years, but I'd like maybe to hear your comments on how that relates to your work.
Yeah, so yeah. And one of the most striking facts you showed was 8 billion daily YouTube downloads. Who owns all the data on that? Anyway.
Nico McDonald from Big Potatoes Manifesto. I'm worried about one thing I heard from you and from Anne. He talked about the internet as if it's personified, and you had talked about wicked problems the internet creates, and the internet magnifies existing inequalities, whereas then the world focus is driven by us and what we do as individuals, as businesses, as governments, and so on. I think it's a bit of bad faith in a way to see the internet as being something that will solve social problems. I was at the World Scientific Information Society in Geneva in 2003, 10, 12 years ago now, we were seeing the same thing. And I think I'd like to observe that there's been a real change in northern stroke western attitudes to the developing world in the last 40 years. 40, 50, 60 years ago at independence, we wanted those countries to be like us, to develop, to be a big industry, modern infrastructure, modern medicine, etc. We've turned around and everything's now about sustainability, low growth, reducing carbon emissions. And I think we've done a huge disservice to the developing world. And we are imagining ICT will solve that problem in a non-carbon producing way, which one, it won't, and two, it won't solve all those problems. So I think we really need to be realistic that we scale down our ambitions. Now you look at what China's doing in Africa, whether you like it democratically or not, it has ambitions without ties for those countries. Right? We need to have those ambitions again for people who are our peers. And ICT will enable that, but not if we have a kind of DFID-like view of the world.
Okay, thanks for that. Yeah.
Richard Deeks, University of Manchester. First of all, congratulations on the report. I know a number of people are sharpening their knives in anticipation of its launch, and they were rather disappointed to find it was so critical and so balanced. The question I wanted to ask was perhaps following up from Nick's point as well, was about what the implications of the report are for the way that development agencies structure their approaches to digital development. I mean, we first began way back around the turn of the century. Agencies like DFID had side-streamed ICT, so they had a specialist unit that just dealt with ICTs. Then, as Nick described, they decided to go mainstream and they completely dissolved their ICT specialisms and focuses, or others like the bank, mainstream and side-streamed as well. So they kept some ICT specialisms and also tried to mainstream into other development sectors. So I wondered, reflecting on what the report says, what would you now say to development agencies about how they structure? Is it mainstreaming? Is it side streaming and mainstreaming? What direction do you feel they ought to take?
Here, and just a sort of variant of that question, so how prescriptive should the World Bank or DFID be on things like regulation of infrastructures or data?
Can I let the lady in front of me go first?
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Drew. I'm from International Alert, an international peacebuilding agency. I was very interested in the directions of all of the speakers' comments around inequality and the challenges of government control, and also the analogue complementarities that will be so necessary to mitigate these aspects. We have an in-house tech department that explores, does research piloting on tech for peace. But I do find that there's a sort of gap on the dimensions or the intersectionality between the digital revolution and peace and conflict, and the dimensions or the enablers of that, thinking about the Arab Spring and so on. But what areas and in what contexts does digitization enable peace, and where does it hamper it? And that would be really interesting to explore.
Do you have an answer?
We have some findings, but we'd love to do some more research. So I was interested if the report looked at this at all.
I'm UNESCO Chair in ICT for Development. I too welcome this report, and it's interesting to draw parallels with the recently launched Human Development Report, which makes similar arguments, focusing at last on inequality. I have to say, I don't think your argument goes anything like far enough. I would encourage you to be more critical, and I'll pick up on Ben's point about the social. I think you still tend to adopt, despite arguing you don't, an instrumental view of technology. That technology can be used in these ways, and it's an economic analysis, and you don't sufficiently look at the interests why these inequalities have been created. It's a very deliberate, conscious effort in reducing inequalities, and until we really address the development implications of that and find ways through which ICTs can support the poorest and the marginalised most, and focus on that, we're still going to get this increase in inequality.
So one question at the back there, then I might actually ask, there's so many questions being thrown, I can give you a chance to...
Hello, Evangelia Verdu, Institute of Development Studies. I want to pick up what Steve said, and for me one of the really interesting issues is the outright disruptive side, in fact disruptive in a negative way of the digital. And I was wondering if, when writing or kind of brainstorming about the report, you consider surfacing some of the more kind of controversial aspects of digital. For instance, you had this you commented on how digital can support like anti-human trafficking efforts, but the internet also enables these processes a lot. And one of your background papers as well is about how the process of digitization outright undermines the ability of governments, especially in developing countries, to keep records. So there's a lot of paradoxes that and negative perspectives emerge from the push for digital. I was wondering how you, as writers, how you thought about this issue.
And then last question at the back there. There may be a few examples of where more digital is not a good thing.
It's Matthew Bloxman, head up the Connected Society program at the GSMA, so that's the Mobile Industry Association. It's great to have the report published. It's fantastic. It's great to hear the enthusiasm around the mobile industry. I think I'd like to pick up just on and reflect on one point that Nick made about this very large group of population that's covered either by fixed or mobile, but isn't actually adopting the internet. I think there really are some significant policy issues to address there. I think historically, policies kind of focused on the infrastructure side and said, if it's built, the demand will come. But I think essentially policy has pushed infrastructure to areas where the commercial realms wouldn't take it. And so I think what we have is a gap of policy to enable those lower income groups, the gender issue, all those other aspects to actually kind of unlock that demand. I think it's a very complex.
What sort of policy do you mean?
I think in the broadest possible sense, from everything from how you price spectrum to drive the cost of infrastructure to actually delivering digital literacy programs, to addressing the gender issue, to addressing affordability in all sorts of ways. It's a very complex realm, and it's something that as an industry we need to focus on more. But I think also the policy environment needs to focus on more to actually stimulate that more.
And do you back Aaron's proposal for data entitlements?
So
entitlements to data.
I can't talk about any but
Would you like to sort of pick up on some of the very many points which have been made? Start with you, Deepak. That should be on anyway.
So I'll pick a few questions, then Uber and we are Haley with one of the chapter authors would be in a better position to answer the questions. But let me begin by answering some of the questions from the panelists and put this together about what is the World Bank going to do, the operationalization is for education for development agencies. The first thing is that this is a world development report, and we actually literally meant it as a world development report. We didn't want to write it only for the low-income countries or middle-income. We really wanted to pitch it, which would have relevance for most of the world. But that has a trade-off that sometimes you speak in a voice that might not be very specific to a country context, but it has more appeal to a larger set of audience than you think. So that takes away a little bit of the depth versus the breadth, and sometimes you might not feel that you have seen enough of this. But from our point of view, the whole idea was that WDR is not what Uber says, it's not a cookbook. We are not obviously here to be extremely prescriptive about this because we know a lot of these things are contextual, as Ben and others mentioned. But we wanted to provide, so there are three things we're trying to do. One is we want to provide stylized facts as much as we can, because we knew that this is an industry where anecdotes have shaped the narrative. So we wanted to see whether we can test those things and what are the data. So one of the things is every data that's in the report and every figure has a URL link, and if you click on it, you get the data for that. So we hope that this would facilitate some more research with putting stylized facts. Second was when we started doing it, we realized that there is no good framework to understand how technology actually impacts or digital or internet impacts development. So we have a small, simple, easy to understand framework. So there's a Spotlight one, which actually talks about the economics of the internet. And this, how do you get to this inclusion, efficiency, innovation? There's a very serious, interesting economics theory behind it, and the control, concentration, and inequality. So I hope another providing a bit of a framework so that people think about it. And finally, we did start in the beginning to say we'll have as much discussion policy as we have on analysis, and that's why you have 3 policy chapters, and we really tried as much as we could, but we we also feel that's the weakest part of the report because it's such a hard nut to crack because we are in the midst of it. So it's hard to find out a good way to answer very specific issues, but we try to do it. So what we're trying in the report is actually to inform and kind of create this debate, change mind if we can. Even 5 people from this room goes back and says, I think I'm going to review the way I thought about this thing would be to us would be success. When we started doing the report, one of the things we said to each of the chapter officers to ourselves is, who is your client? Who is the one person that you really want to target this report to? And each of us had one. So it will be like Minister of Finance from Mozambique or Ethiopia is mine, if I can change that. So it was that objective, not so much to kind of come back and say what we're going to do, but we are starting to think about what we're doing, and Tim and Uber will talk about it, so I'm not kind of discuss the first thing here. But the other thing we found in this report is, there's this paper that Tom Elvis, historian, always talks about. C.P. Snow had this paper in the 60s, British intellectual, talking about how the scientists and the intellectuals don't talk to each other at all, and that has created this big divergence in the society. We felt it all the time in this while writing this report. So you go to Silicon Valley, and for them, the whole analog foundation is invisible. They think technology can do everything, and all these intellectuals are all extremely pessimistic bunch of people. The government can't do anything. We can just change the world. And then you come to government, you come to the Ministry of Finance, and for them, the technology is almost invisible. The finance minister is not thinking about, or the education minister is not thinking about the technology part, a lot of the brick and mortar issues. And so this report is trying to build a bridge between that. And, if we have succeeded in bringing that, that's one of the way we think this report will make an impact. We are doing a lot of things, and I hope Tim will touch on some of those things in terms of what we are going to do. But one of the things we discussed is the World Bank, or GFI for that matter, is the analog foundation to the distribution. And everything that we have been doing for 60 years are actually to build, improve business climate, and human capital, to build institutions. But now we can do that better. And that's what the whole idea is. Can internet accelerate the formation of this competence? And so there is so why we keep doing the same thing, but we can do it much better and much better than we did before. And the report goes to talk about that. So I kind of leave it here and then see if there are more questions that come back.
Briefly, but
sure. I was hoping Deepak would answer all the questions. I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the challenges Anne put on the table, and I think the bank is certainly thinking about all this, and Tim can talk a little bit more about that. But in terms of galvanizing connectivity, certainly that's a huge effort. And as Deepak mentioned, also when we talk about digital capabilities, what's really good to see in the World Bank, and I hope that's representative of other development organizations, is how sort of this is spreading into other sectors. So for instance, our jobs unit, which is also a cross-cutting unit to begin with, is really all over this topic of ICT and the impact of jobs and so on, the same in the education field and so on. So we really do have sort of a galvanization within the bank. We don't have sort of a formal structure yet. And there's maybe a question of, do we need an ICT unit, sorry, Tim? But there certainly is still a need for the plumbers and the people who really think about the cables and the regulations in the sector and so on. It's really good. But we need even more sort of the champions in all these other sectors or practices that all now the effect who are pushing these issues forward. And so that's why sometimes the client countries willing or not willing to do it, but what do you do with all this open data? And we have some examples, for instance, from Kenya, where there was a champion in the Kenyan Statistical Office to promote open data and so on, but then there was very little use and very little uptake of it. So it's actually much more, not so much now the area is not the bank not insisting on it or the country not wanting it, but really giving the capability to journalists in the country, to researchers and so on, to really take advantage of it. Tim knows a lot more about this particular case study. Now the human rights issues, that's a very interesting and somewhat complex issue, of course. The bank is not a political organization, of course, and it always has to walk a fine line. And so in the report, you also see when we talk about things like censorship and so on, we really try to make the economic argument, which is not easy at all. It's because we have very little evidence, actually, when we tell a certain country that the censorship that you're controlling, what people can talk about on the internet and so on, that has real economic costs. we actually have very little solid evidence of what those costs are. So from first principles, of course, we know it, and we make that argument. You look at there's a box in the overview, for instance, those are all there, but if they come back and say, where's the peer-reviewed literature that gives me the, that actually tells me what those costs are, it's not there. So it's not always easy to make the argument just from the economic side and not from a fundamental human rights side, which of course the bank also supports, but is less likely to base all the arguments on it. So we do have some of that in there. There's a nice contribution from Human Rights Watch that we drew on, that we reference and so on. But it's certainly there. And it's probably something also we should bring in the bank to think about in the context of the existing safeguards. So in principle they should apply, and all the women's rights, human rights and so on are in there, whether they're always followed to the letter in many infrastructure projects is another question. But I know also that some telecom operators and so on have actually asked for the bank to be more proactive in this, because they really need some support when they go into the country and the country wants to have really watered down telecom regulations in order to access data that they shouldn't access and so on. They are not always in the best position to insist on these changes. Organizations like the World Bank and other development organizations that finance these kinds of things do it, that's much better, of course. And that relates also a little bit on this question about peace and conflict. There's the whole chapter 3 is about governance issues, and the Arab Spring is one of the examples where there was a lot of excitement, and we had in Berlin a workshop, and they brought in somebody from digital Tunisia, and he was really saying, no, Facebook really made a difference in Tunisia. It really helped us kick out a dictator, and we have pluralism now, we have democratic institutions and so on. But unfortunately, Tunisia is a bit of an exception, because after Tunisia, all the other dictators learned very quickly how to use the internet to prevent exactly what happened in Tunisia. So that's certainly something we're picking up on the report, not just at the sort of macro level and revolutions and so on, but I think what is even more fundamentally important in the development context in many ways is at the local level. So how do you get local government accountability? How can we actually use these digital technologies to promote this? And it's not.
I'd open up for one very quick round of last comments and questions. And I'm going to ask each of our commentators also have 1 minute before we finish. Just before I do, Nick Dyer's sort of final point about capability. Is the World Bank now packed with people who know how to change a router, understand the economics of Twitter, that sort of stuff? Or is that a problem or not? You? Okay, so I'm just going on. Right, quick show of hands. Who would like to say something? Oh, lots of people, they do. Yeah, let's start here. Please be very brief.
I'll try. Hi, my name is Kojo Guachi. I'm the Deputy Director with the Alliance for Affordable Internet. We're very encouraged by the report. We hope it's, as Mr. Dyer suggests, like a flower and does create change. One of the reasons why we're happy is because of the mention of affordability and the focus and understanding of what a challenge that is. And one of the things we've been thinking about internally is this affordability target that's been set of 5% of average income per month. And we're mindful that a number of countries, like the majority of countries in the world, have actually reached that target, but we're not seeing the consequent uptake of services. Is there a need or a desire within the bank to see that target revised? And if not, should there be a desire in the bank to see that target revised downwards to perhaps 2 or 3%? I'm mindful.
Just do a yes or no on that.
Tim, do you want to?
It's not a sensible target.
Not a sensible target. Okay. Fine. All right. Yeah. 5% of GDP.
Geoff Wong, thank you very much for this great report. I come from Mulgan, but sadly I left it 10 years ago because I saw the business model didn't work. My question is that the right question of having digital or internet on all mobiles? Because there are services that are actually much simpler and much more direct, like SMS or other ways of delivering services rather than rubbish internet. So I just wonder. Thank you.
And at the front.
Yes, Najmal Hassan, University of Greenwich Business School. My question is, for countries that we cite as examples, such as Estonia and Nordic countries and so on, and this has implications for developing world. and in the UK, where we are told that there's a race that we have to reach. And in that context, have these countries, Estonia onwards, have they reached a digital peak? And the evidence is rather I would say disturbing. I was in Finland back in the month of December, and I talked to about 10 Estonians, talented young millennial Estonians. And they moved to Finland. They don't have a job in Finland. And I heard that they were going to move from Finland to Australia, because Finland doesn't have jobs either. So this was one part of the millennial community. Then I looked at the same time in Finland, about 3,000 migrants were moved to Finland in the migration story, were planning to leave Finland at their own cost, go back to where they came from. And these were also part of the millennium community globally. So what is the message for us in Britain? Should we aim and work toward the same race and see a digital divide within these so-called developed countries?
Maybe one for another day, but Finland has many virtues. It's had high unemployment for a long, long time, actually, contrary to perceptions. I'd like to ask each of our speakers, if you'd like to have 1 minute to comment on what you've heard here, and perhaps particularly on sort of priorities for action. Is anything you want to add to your cogent and comprehensive comments?
Well, I suppose my only comment is a sense of urgency. So people talk about digital revolution. Actually, revolutions happened. We had years ago. But it's really interesting. If you listen to Desert Island Discs, Bill Gates, he started off by saying that his early career was spent in Microsoft, which he built, very much engaged in the early stages of the digital revolution, internet revolution. But actually spent his whole career now dealing with interventions that actually don't need digital, don't need internet. So he's actually going the other direction. So we've got a job of work to do to persuade people that there still is, on Bill Gates doesn't persuade people, that there still is a real win here, and to help accelerate the country.
Right. Great. A couple of things. One's, I guess, a concern that I want to voice, and the other is a request from everyone here. The concern is that in setting out the digital and analog dimensions, please let's not get siloed into the digital folk carry on with their technology and the analog folk carry on with institutions. The reality is digital and analog institutions co-evolve with each other. The introduction of digital technologies creates the space for new institutions to move and adjust. Institutional changes can create the space for technology, and so we really need to make sure we take an interdisciplinary, cross stakeholder perspective on this, and not let it get siloed off into different areas. The request is really that, as I said earlier, I think this provides such a good systemic overview of the challenges, and it lays down a baton for all of us working on policy, on practice and research. And it's one that IDS has decided to try and pick up on in a small way, and we've started doing the scoping work for a state of digital development report that we want to follow this report in around 18 months' time, and we want to do a pilot. We're consulting quite widely. We want to understand the kinds of issues we might do on an ongoing basis to show the development of this area of work, but also key issues we might focus on, like disempowerment, like rights, and so on. And so it's really a request, if you're interested, if you think that you want to help try and pick up this heavy baton and run with it, please get in touch.
What Nick said. Plus 100. We have this SDG target to connect everybody by 2020. We also have another target to empower women through ICTs. And I think if we can approach the two of those together as a package and make one of our tests for success in connectivity, the extent to which women have been empowered through that, we will cover both sides of the equation we're talking about here today. It's a huge challenge and we can move really fast.
Thanks. Well, I'm afraid we are out of time. As everyone said, this is a fantastic report. It's very rich in analysis and detail and sort of sobriety, it's sort of sensible about the pros and the cons and the complexities of issues which are often treated in, I think, rather crude primary colours, either of celebration or of fear. The only thing I two other points to make. One is the singular of the digital revolution feels wrong. These are a succession of revolutions. It's 40 years since the internet protocols, 25 years since the World Wide Web. We've got a whole series of actually rather sort of overlapping revolutions in mobile, now machine learning, all sorts of things, which are certainly not a single event and are moving very fast. And as Ben said, even the very notion of a digital analog split feels a bit anachronistic. There's some sort of digital element in so many things now, certainly in most cities in the world, even if not in areas which don't have any kind of signal. And that's the kind of the mind shift, which is why having a kind of ICT unit may have made sense a generation ago, but feels completely wrong now because digital is in everything. And as Nick said, in some ways what's surprising, this is also come up in all the discussions of governments around the world, is there's been remarkably little real disruption yet. And it's not hard to think why that might be the case, because disruption only comes against people's will, usually, because it threatens power structures, and that's where you get in Amazon or in finance. And the very rare examples, like the ones you mentioned, of the M-Pesas or UID in India and so on, was interesting precisely because they are exceptions and have not, in fact, spread very far. So, all I end by saying is thanking our speakers for coming. I haven't given you more chance to answer all of your questions. Urge those of you who haven't read the report to read it, and perhaps do a little plug for a thing which is on your seats, which is a forthcoming report co-edited by Ben and my colleague Kirsten Bound, which looks at innovation in international development more broadly, but including a lot of examples of really creative, useful application of digital tools to broader development goals. Thank you all.